In the depths of human relationships lies something more profound than mere chance or luck. Every person who enters our lives and touches our emotional sphere does so for reasons rooted in the most hidden corners of our consciousness. Carl Jung viewed love not as a simple coincidence between two people, but as a deep reflection of the inner world. Love that causes turmoil, pain, or obsession is a kind of psychic mirror reflecting aspects of the personality that one does not want to see, suppresses, or has not yet realized. This mechanism is associated with the shadow side of the personality, a key concept in Jungian psychology. Everything that a person does not recognize in themselves is projected onto others, especially those who evoke strong emotions, awaken insecurity, provoke a need for control, or a desire to escape. Love that arises unexpectedly often appears as an opportunity for growth, but is actually a call from the unconscious, an uncomfortable teacher speaking not in words but through reactions, wounds, and repetitive patterns. When someone enters your life and seems to touch the most painful spot, they are not destroying you, but merely pointing to what already existed within, something you have been avoiding. Jung argued that enlightenment cannot be achieved by imagining bright images, but only through awareness of one's own darkness. In the realm of love, this darkness manifests as dependency, fear of abandonment, and need for approval or attraction to emotionally unavailable individuals. It is not by chance that one consistently falls in love with those who do not reciprocate. A series of relationships that leave only a sense of emptiness is also not a mere coincidence. Behind this lies a certain pattern of behavior that cannot be broken by external love alone. The key to solving the problem lies in developing inner awareness. Love itself cannot fill internal voids. On the contrary, it only brings them to the surface, making them more obvious. Imagine that each person you have loved is a reflection of a certain part of your personality, not in a direct, but in a symbolic sense. A cold and emotionally unavailable partner may reflect your own difficulties in accepting vulnerability. The desire to control a partner may be a mirror image of the need to control your own feelings. Even someone who seemed perfect but ultimately betrayed you may point to a tendency to idealize and have excessive expectations of others, as well as an insufficient ability to support yourself independently. Attracting such people into your life is not a punishment or a consequence of karmic debts. It happens because they are on a similar energetic, emotional, and mental level with certain unresolved aspects of your personal history. Relationships are not just an emotional connection, they are a kind of script where the unconscious gets a chance to speak out, and it does so quite loudly and insistently. Therefore, when a relationship brings pain and disappointment, don't immediately ask, "Why did he or she do that?" It is much more important to ask yourself, "Why did I allow this to happen? What part of me was looking for this experience? What is this wound telling me?" Self-analysis is no easy task, requiring courage and honesty. It is much easier to shift the blame onto another, labeling them as selfish, narcissistic, or evasive. However, as long as you stubbornly seek the reasons for your failures in the external world, you are doomed to relive the same scenario in relationships over and over again. The partners change, their names and faces, but the essence remains the same. Unhealed emotional wounds will bleed again and again until you learn the necessary lesson. As Carl Jung insightfully noted, every relationship is a kind of initiation, an important stage in life's journey. Not everyone stays with us forever, but each of them appears in our lives not by chance, but to teach us something. Some show us what we deserve, others demonstrate what we are willing to tolerate. Some elevate us, others, on the contrary, cause pain and suffering. But even in the most painful experiences, wisdom is hidden. Even in chaos, one can discern the messages of the soul. Unfortunately, many people prefer not to see that behind every strong attraction, behind every romantic obsession, there is an echo of personal history, desperately calling out to be heard. Often a person clings to another not because of true love, but because their wound recognizes kindred pain in the other. This is not fate, but merely a personified fragment of their own shadow. Instead of facing their fears and weaknesses, they romanticize them, justify them, and idealize them. When faced with what awakens your deepest fears, do not give in to the instinctive desire to flee. It is important to linger, listen to your feelings, and observe your body's reaction. Tension, stiffness, a sense of hopelessness, a need for constant reassurance. These are all reflections of an internal state, not characteristics of another person. Paradoxically, the deeper one's self-awareness, the more profoundly the type of love they attract transforms. It's not that ideal partners suddenly appear, but rather that they stop responding to what they mistakenly took for love, which was merely a manifestation of need. They no longer confuse the intensity of passions with genuine intimacy, the desire for control with responsibility, or anxiety with fervent passion. One learns to see the essence hidden beneath the surface and, most importantly, gains the ability to say no in situations where they previously remained silent out of fear of loss. However, the path to this inner freedom lies through the thorny forest of self-discovery. It requires courage to look back at the past without victimhood, to look inward without judgment, and to look forward without illusions. True love, devoid of the impurities of need and dependence, is not something to be found in the external world. It is created within a person, and only when they learn to accept and love their imperfections will they stop seeking someone to fix their broken parts. Deep within the human being, in the hidden corners of the soul, a subtle, almost imperceptible choice is made. This choice determines who will be looked upon with interest, to whom warm emotions will be given, and who will be allowed to penetrate the inner world. And this decision is made not by the conscious mind, but by that ancient, wise part that holds the burden of memories, unresolved emotional torments, inherited beliefs, and cherished expectations that arose long before one realized what love is. That's why the great psychologist Carl Jung asserted that until one becomes conscious of the unconscious, it will rule their life, and they will call it fate. This harsh statement places responsibility for emotional choices on the individual, in a place where they least want to see it. Many believe they fall in love because of sympathy, coincidence, or fate. However, attraction often arises towards what is lacking in one's own life, towards what one secretly dreams of becoming, or towards what one fears to face. Attraction arises towards the freedom one denies oneself, towards the power one does not recognize in oneself, towards the abandonment one has already experienced, towards the wound that has never been healed. Another person appears as a living embodiment of something unresolved. What is commonly called love is essentially a complex dance between needs that attract each other. In this dance, every step, every gesture, every silence has its own hidden emotional subtext. His or her confidence attracts like a magnet because doubts and insecurities nest in one's own soul. This person's independence seems incredibly appealing against the backdrop of one's own self-forgetfulness. The distance they keep beckons with an inexplicable force, for within lies an untold story of how love had to be begged for, not accepted, with pride and dignity. People burst into life as if they had been waiting for this moment for years. They seem to read the soul, awaken the strongest emotions, and become vitally necessary. But in the beginning, one often fails to notice that this intensity is not always true love. Sometimes it's trauma, cleverly disguised. The nervous system recognizes a familiar, albeit painful, pattern. The familiar, even if it causes suffering, feels like home because deep down, one seeks not another person but the emotional experience that the body assimilated in early childhood. If one has learned that love is unpredictable, they will gravitate towards instability. If love is associated with pain, then they will cling to the one who causes it the most. And all this happens unconsciously, because the choice is made not by reason, but by a personal history deeply rooted in the subconscious. In this situation, deep self-work becomes not just desirable, but vital. It is important to understand that this is not about avoiding love or erecting emotional barriers, but about critically analyzing the internal motives that determine the choice of partner. Who is guiding this choice? A mature, conscious person who understands their worth and deserves worthy treatment, or a traumatized inner child still yearning for salvation and recognition? When the choice is dictated by childhood traumas, love turns into a desperate plea. When the choice comes from the adult self, love becomes a conscious decision, not a vital necessity. However, achieving this level of awareness requires courage and honesty. It is necessary to cast aside all masks and impartially look at one's attachments. Perhaps it's time to acknowledge that the partner wasn't cruel but merely placed on a pedestal they didn't deserve. Recognizing one's own idealization, ignoring red flags, settling for less, and mistaking attention for love is a painful but liberating process. Accepting your role in what happened restores lost power. A person stops perceiving love as something that happens on its own and begins to realize that they are the architect of their relationships, defining their form and content. This fundamentally changes everything: communication style, established boundaries, and the view of the partner. The need for constant approval and the desire for the other person to fix things disappears. The personality becomes self-sufficient and emotionally stable, turning love from a roller coaster into a reliable bridge connecting two hearts. However, contrary to popular belief, the intensity of love not only does not diminish over time, but also acquires more genuine, sincere, and humane features. This paradox is explained by the fact that mature love grows not from the soil of fear and need, but from the mutual attraction and recognition of two self-sufficient individuals who consciously choose to journey through life together. The key moment here is the transformation of the internal state. Instead of seeking a partner to heal emotional wounds, a person begins to radiate energy of healing and wholeness. The quality of love relationships directly depends on the harmony and maturity of the individual. Clear personal boundaries, a healthy self-perception, and the ability to enjoy solitude without feeling empty, all these factors form the foundation for healthy and fulfilling love. As Jung astutely observed, love is not a blind element, but a powerful spotlight that illuminates the most secret corners of the soul. It comes not to fill internal voids, but to point out their existence, not to provide ready-made answers, but to raise questions that a person has diligently avoided for years. It is this moment of awareness that often causes flight from true intimacy, because conscious love requires emotional maturity and a willingness to abandon infantile fantasies about a partner who will come and fill all. The shortcomings. It requires discarding naive romanticism and accepting a deeper truth. Genuine love begins where the acute need for another person ends. Only when a person is able to maintain their integrity and self-sufficiency can they open up to love that will not be a repetition of past traumas and voids, but an expansion and enrichment of their existence. Love is often presented as a happy accident, a gift from above, but Carl Jung urges us to go beyond this romantic view. With disarming directness, he asserts that the love that enters our lives serves as a mirror, reflecting not so much our desires as the essence of our soul. And this thought, despite its poetry, is disturbing. After all, if the love we attract is characterized by dishonesty, neglect, insults, or instability, what does this say about ourselves? This is not about feeling guilty, but about the need for awareness. No one strives for pain, but many subconsciously choose those who already know how to inflict it. This happens because such an experience seems familiar. It corresponds to an internal scenario that has been played out for years, even if it is painful to admit. Observing recurring patterns in relationships, you can notice certain echoes of the past, similar types with different faces, situations that, changing the scenery, return to the same emotional experiences. It is in this invisible space between aspiration and suffering that the true reason for what we attract into our lives lies. We attract what we believe we deserve, even if this belief is not conscious. Attraction comes from the energy we radiate when we are alone with ourselves, from how we conduct our internal dialogue, from the ways we fill the internal void, from the degree of self-acceptance. Another person only responds to the silent call emanating from us. Thus, some people, without realizing it, become magnets for problematic relationships. This happens not because they deliberately seek them out, but because of insufficient self-knowledge, which does not allow them to protect themselves from what harms them. At the very heart of attraction lies a deep truth. The love that a person attracts into their life serves as a reflection of their inner world and degree of self-knowledge. It is not about external attributes, such as beauty or intelligence or even virtue. It is about the unique emotional frequency that they radiate, about the invisible boundaries that their subconscious establishes, and about the unspoken stories that live in the depths of their soul. Love appears not just as a connection between two people, but as a powerful tool for self-knowledge. It becomes a peculiar mirror, reflecting life's own limitations and unhealed wounds. Another person, like an actor on a stage, unwittingly plays out a script in which the deepest fears and vulnerabilities surface. This is why love is so often accompanied by anxiety, obsessive desire to possess, and painful dependence. A person seeks love not out of inner fulfillment, but out of an acute need, from the illusory hope that another can heal wounds, the nature of which they themselves do not fully understand. However, love does not possess the miraculous power to heal what a person is not ready to face openly. It can only shake them up, expose their true essence, present them before a mirror of truth. And then the person decides whether to use this reflection for personal growth or shatter it in despair. It is widely believed that love justifies any suffering, that pain testifies to the depth of feelings, and that all-consuming passion is a sign of authenticity. However, psychologist Carl Jung held a different point of view. In his opinion, true love does not destroy, but rather integrates the personality, does not leave ruins behind, but inspires the achievement of wholeness. This wholeness implies the acceptance of not only the bright, but also the dark sides of one's nature: jealousy, fears, the need for control, and self-doubt. Love brings to the surface both the best qualities and what a person is used to hiding from themselves and others, and this, contrary to popular belief, is not a tragedy. On the contrary, it can become a unique opportunity to turn the unconscious into the conscious, to transform an ordinary connection into a path of self-discovery, and to use relationships not as a refuge from reality, but as a school of personal growth. Realizing that the love that comes into life is not a simple coincidence, but a mirror reflection of the inner world, requires considerable courage. After all, at this moment, the opportunity to shift responsibility to a partner and avoid meeting oneself disappears. There comes a need to stop and look inside to understand which part of the personality stubbornly chooses to remain in the shadows, where it is not noticed. Which part finds solace in a lack of attention and care? Which part is convinced that it does not deserve more? These questions are not easy, but they are vital, since the answers to them cannot be found in the external world. They never were there. Until a person conducts this inner work, they will repeatedly attract the same type of relationship into their life. Faces, forms, vows change, but the essence remains the same, because the script remains unchanged. And only the person themselves can rewrite it, but not with empty affirmations or superficial self-help techniques, but through a sincere and deep exploration of their emotional history, childhood memories, first attachments, and entrenched beliefs about love. It is there that patterns of behavior are formed. It is there that the script originates. And until a person returns to the origins, they will be doomed to repeat the same melody, even if they change the song. Attracting love into a person's life is not a simple coincidence, but rather the result of deep, often unconscious processes. It's like a letter that the subconscious sends to the universe, shaping the circle of communication and types of relationships. Entering into a love relationship, each person discovers new facets of their personality, sometimes encountering what they preferred not to notice. These aspects require acceptance and love, first of all, from oneself, since it is impossible to receive from the outside what a person denies themselves. Respect from others begins with self-respect, with the recognition of one's own value and dignity. No one can relieve the burden of the past if the person themselves is not ready to let it go. Love appears not as magic, but as revelation, as an accurate mirror reflecting the inner world. Having learned to look at oneself without fear and prejudice, a person will see in this mirror not need and searching, but presence and truth. A special revelation lies in observing the manifestations of love, when the desire to impress disappears and only the authenticity of feelings remains. At this point, where love moves from promises to daily actions, the true emotional structure of the personality is revealed. As Jung noted, nothing allows one to understand the soul of a person so deeply as the analysis of their ability to love. It is important not only whom a person chooses to love, but also how they do it, from what motives and with what readiness to face their own internal conflicts for the sake of this love. In modern society, many people mistakenly seek in love a deliverance from internal problems, a kind of panacea for feelings of emptiness, self-doubt, and the obsessive feeling of their own inferiority. In this aspiration, they tend to project an idealized image onto their chosen one, seeing in them a savior capable of filling all the spiritual gaps. However, as Jung astutely noted, such projection has nothing to do with genuine love, being merely an illusion, a shadow cleverly disguised as sincere attraction. After all, when a person loves another not for their true essence, but for the role they are meant to play in their life, it is not love, but exploitation. This form of relationship, although widespread in society, inevitably leads to disappointment, as no one can endlessly bear the burden of another's salvation. And here another bitter truth emerges. The love we attract into our lives is determined not by our conscious desires, but by the deep-seated attitudes of our subconscious. We attract those who, sometimes unconsciously, perfectly match our unhealed wounds. Often this means attraction to emotionally unavailable partners because we ourselves have learned to defend against deep attachment, or infatuation with those who do not reciprocate our feelings, because at a subconscious level we do not choose ourselves. Thus love becomes a symbolic battlefield where our innermost desires and psychological traumas collide, the desire for intimacy and the fear of losing control of the situation. When an individual achieves harmony with themselves, their perception of love undergoes a radical change. They stop looking for confirmation of their worth from the outside, get rid of the desire for control, and do not allow others to dominate them. Love blossoms from a state of inner freedom, not from a feeling of acute need. They do not resort to retention, do not use manipulation, and do not require constant assurances of love, because they realize that love is not a power struggle, but a meeting of two complete personalities, not an attempt to connect two disparate halves. Consequently, the deeper the work on oneself, the more strongly the nature of the attracted love is transformed. A person stops looking for distorted reflections of their own pain and begins to attract those who openly accept their shortcomings without trying to hide them. This process does not have a clear sequence. Sometimes it seems that healing has already been achieved, but old patterns of behavior return. The subconscious carefully guards its secrets, defending itself and arranging tests. Every relationship provides an opportunity for deeper self-analysis, allowing you to ask yourself questions not only about what is being sought in another person, but also about what the individual denies themselves. After all, there is no more dangerous connection than one that is based on the expectation that another person will come and fix the past. This hope, although it seems attractive, actually poisons the relationship, turning love into an obligation. Love that arises from a sense of duty becomes an act of survival, not a manifestation of fullness and self-sufficiency. Carl Jung viewed individuation as a complex and profound process of becoming a whole person. It is a journey in which a person strives for harmony between all aspects of their self, both those that are proudly demonstrated to the world and those that are carefully hidden even from themselves. In this context, love acts not as an end in itself, but rather as fertile ground on which unintegrated parts of the personality sprout and manifest. Love makes a person defenseless, forces them to weaken their defenses and allow another to see their inner world with all its contradictions and chaos. It is in moments of emotional openness that old wounds and unresolved conflicts manifest. It is no coincidence that people who avoid love are often most afraid of facing themselves. They subconsciously understand that true love requires exposing the soul, not just demonstrating the ego or social mask. Therefore, analyzing the love relationships that a person attracts into their life becomes a powerful tool for self-knowledge. It is like looking into the most honest mirror, which can reflect painful truths, but at the same time gives liberation, revealing hidden corners of the inner world. Such analysis confronts a person with their limitations, contradictions, and unconscious attachments. However, it also provides an opportunity to make another choice, heal, and break the vicious circle. Once a person realizes a recurring pattern, they can no longer ignore it. At this moment, a person gains strength, although not always enough courage, to choose a new path. Love ceases to be an accident and becomes a conscious act. A person begins to love not out of hunger or need, but out of abundance and fullness. They choose a partner not out of emptiness and despair, but out of clarity and understanding. They strive not to fill an internal hole, but to share their life with another person. And here it is, the fullness of being. However, the path to it is thorny and requires going through the crucible of trials, through a painful process of self-analysis, through the courage to admit one's own mistakes and misdeeds. It's essential to recognize that you too have caused pain to others, made missteps, and allowed situations that didn't align with your true needs. The love you attract into your life isn't just a romantic story with another person. It's a silent dialogue of your soul about yourself. It's easy to say we deserve a great, mature, conscious, and deep love. We repeat it like a mantra, secretly wish for it, visualize it, as if it should happen with a wave of a magic wand. But the question Carl Jung would suggest we ask ourselves is, what kind of love are you capable of enduring? Attracting something is only part of the process. The real challenge lies in holding on to it, facing what that love awakens within you, and not sabotaging it the moment it starts to touch those strings of your soul that you'd rather leave undisturbed. What many mistakenly take for true love is actually a reflection of a relationship where both partners have done tremendous inner work to avoid using the other person as an extension of their own needs and desires. Sometimes the love you attract has immense power but lacks a healthy foundation. It consumes you entirely, pulls you along, causes obsession, and while you mistakenly take it for passion or intensity of feelings, it's really just a form of suffering disguised as a connection. Jung explained that such intense relationships are often the result of a powerful projection of the anima or animus, internal figures representing the unconscious feminine or masculine side of our psyche. When we meet someone who embodies these archetypal images, we experience an irresistible, almost magical attraction. However, at that moment we don't see the real person, but only a part of ourselves projected outward. We fall in love with the image we ourselves created, not the living person. And when that image inevitably crumbles, we experience devastation, not from the loss of another, but from the collapse of our own illusions and fantasies. Often when relationships end or someone leaves our life, there's a sense of loss, as if something rightfully ours has been taken away. However, this feeling stems not from possessing another person, but from the emotional role we assign to them, considering it almost the cornerstone of our existence. And the pain that torments us is not so much related to the departure of a specific individual, but to the need to once again face those feelings and experiences that this person, like a mirror, reflected within us: loneliness, fear, insecurity. As Jung keenly observed, what we stubbornly refuse to acknowledge sooner or later becomes our destiny. In the context of love relationships, this unconscious manifests as repetitive scenarios where we repeatedly connect with different people but face the same emotional wounds. And this will continue until we decide to look deep within ourselves and understand the reasons for these patterns. The love that enters our lives when we begin to awaken, heal, and ask ourselves profound questions is qualitatively different from previous attachments. It's no longer built on empty promises and inflated expectations. There's no more need for someone to complete us, because we've stopped believing in our inherent incompleteness. We no longer wait for a savior, because we've learned to cope with life's adversities ourselves and support ourselves in difficult moments. This new inner state radically changes the energy we radiate into the world, and as a result, attracts a completely different type of love to us. This is a love that doesn't require wearing masks and participating in games. It doesn't depend on external approval and doesn't strive for control. It's a love that simply allows itself to be, blossoming in its natural beauty. Even in more harmonious and healthy relationships, difficulties can arise, as they are built not on emotional outbursts and drama, but on calmness and stability. For people accustomed to chaos in their personal lives, such tranquility may seem unfamiliar and even frightening. They may mistakenly take calmness for boredom and the maturity of a partner for unemotionality. Often such people subconsciously destroy these relationships, as they don't know how to accept love that doesn't cause them anxiety and doesn't keep them in a state of constant emotional readiness. As Jung noted, familiar, even painful, experiences may seem safer than the unknown. Therefore, inner work on oneself consists not only in healing old wounds, but also in being able to accept love without fear and apprehension. Observing a person who has gone through this path means seeing a profound transformation. He no longer pursues, runs away from, or idealizes his partner. He loves consciously, standing firmly on his own 2 feet while remaining open in spirit. Such a person understands that love is not always perfect, but even in its imperfect form, it can be beautiful if there is awareness and acceptance. He doesn't try to remake his partner, nor does he dissolve into them, losing his own identity. He finds a balance between personal needs and the interests of the couple, building relationships based on patience, honesty, and humanity. At this point, love ceases to be an obsession and becomes a conscious choice. Every day, a person chooses to be with their partner without forgetting about themselves. This is not always easy, but there comes an understanding that the deepest love is the one that respects the freedom of another person without perceiving it as a threat. This becomes possible when a person stops living in fear of being rejected, of not being good enough, or of being alone. After all, the love we attract into our lives is directly related to how we treat ourselves, and these inner relationships, invisible to outsiders, speak volumes. There is no universal recipe or clear instruction that defines the path to true love and self-discovery. It is a deeply personal, intimate process that often has to be gone through alone. However, every honest confrontation with oneself, every recognition and acceptance of those aspects of one's personality that were previously rejected, brings a person closer to the ability to love sincerely and unconditionally. It is then, when you least expect it, that a person appears who is ready not to save, but to accompany you on this path, not as a predetermined fate, but as a fellow traveler. Such love, devoid of loud statements and empty promises, has a transformative power, revealing inner potential rather than simply bestowing external benefits. In every person's life there comes a moment of realization that the choice of love is not accidental. This realization may not come in silence and tranquility, but may strike suddenly like an emotional hurricane, when seemingly significant relationships collapse, or when a person repeatedly makes the same mistakes, not understanding their cause. It is at this moment, when the mirror of illusions shatters, that the true picture of the motives underlying love preferences is revealed. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung argued that we attract into our lives not what we desire, but what we are. This thought, though it may seem unpleasant, is an invitation to explore the most painful depths of one's soul. Behind every failed love story, behind every connection that diminishes dignity, behind every sacrificial giving that leads to devastation, lies an unspoken story of the relationship with oneself. This is the part of the personality that a person avoids, the inner child deprived. Of attention, the teenager who learned to be silent for the sake of love, the adult still seeking approval in the eyes of others. When this inner story remains misunderstood and dormant in the unconscious, it begins to manifest in the people around us, especially in those to whom there is an irresistible attraction, those who seem to ignite something primal, instinctive, and urgent. However, this fire does not always indicate compatibility. Often, it is a symptom of an unhealed wound that requires healing and care. According to Jung, human relationships are a kind of stage on which the drama of the soul unfolds, where it undergoes self-knowledge, reflection, and confrontation with reality. Intimate closeness is unthinkable without confrontation, without a clash of interests and worldviews. Love sometimes turns into a painful process because it awakens in a person those aspects of his personality that he has carefully hidden and suppressed: jealousy, self-doubt, fear of loneliness, the desire for domination or submission. All these carefully hidden feelings come to the surface in the realm of love relationships. And if a person is not ready to face them, he is doomed to repeat the same scenarios. In such moments, a person asks questions. Why do only those who are unavailable appear in his life? Why is he attracted to those who do not reciprocate? Why is it so difficult to build harmonious relationships? The answer to these questions rarely lies on the surface in the external world. The true reason lies in the depths of the subconscious, in those beliefs that were assimilated without critical reflection. Perhaps from childhood, a person learned that love is inextricably linked with suffering, that it must be earned, that it requires self-sacrifice. Perhaps in his mind, passion is associated with chaos, distance with desire, and coldness with mystery. And, without realizing it, these hidden attitudes govern his emotional life, determining the choice of partners and relationship scenarios. Perhaps one of the most difficult challenges in life is not just winning the affection of someone who genuinely loves you, but feeling worthy of that love. This is because a lack of deep inner work can make healthy relationships seem foreign and incomprehensible. A person may unconsciously begin to reject, sabotage, or erect barriers, as if their emotional system doesn't know how to react to feelings not based on acute need. As Jung asserted, the soul needs conflict to develop, and it is in this struggle between the departing past and the emerging new that true personal transformation occurs. It's crucial to realize that no one can walk this path for another. A person can study various materials, reflect and analyze, but there comes a moment when they must be alone in silence and ask themselves key questions. What am I really looking for in another person? Love, or a way to silence my pain? Am I striving for genuine connection or seeking confirmation of my ego? Do I need company, or am I seeking refuge to avoid facing my loneliness? The answers to these questions won't appear instantly. They will come gradually, in fragments, sometimes in the form of memories, sometimes in the form of tears that a person didn't even know existed, but they will come, and then a clearer vision of oneself and one's needs will emerge. As a result, a person will stop looking for a lifeline in love and instead see it as an opportunity to expand their world and grow personally. They will no longer dissolve in someone else's eyes, expecting them to return their lost identity, because they will know firmly who they really are. And from that moment on, everything changes dramatically. How a person chooses, what they are willing to tolerate, what they give, and what they allow themselves to receive. At the beginning of the healing journey, a person may face a sense of isolation. As previous, seemingly comfortable, models of behavior and interaction with others lose their relevance. However, this loneliness is not a punishment, but a process of cleansing and freeing up space for something more authentic and meaningful. It's a kind of preparation for meeting true love. When such love enters life, it will not be perfect or all-powerful. It will not rid one of internal contradictions or fill all the voids. Rather, it will become an invitation to conscious forward movement, to a generous exchange of feelings and energy, to perceiving a partner as a whole person, rather than an object to be remade. At this moment, the understanding comes that it is important not only what kind of people we attract into our lives, but also what position we take in relationships. We begin to act not out of need and despair, but from a state of presence and awareness. The goal of the relationship becomes not to fill an internal void, but to joyfully celebrate the meeting of two self-sufficient personalities. At this level of maturity, Love ceases to be a source of drama and becomes a deep connection filled with tenderness, courage, and mutual support. At the same time, each partner continues to care for their own well-being and development. This becomes possible when a person stops acting impulsively and begins to make choices guided by the voice of their awakened soul. After all, the love we attract into our lives is always a reflection of our inner world. The question is only whether we are ready to see and accept what it shows us. Carl Jung, asserting the impossibility of achieving enlightenment through contemplation of bright images, but only through the awareness of one's own darkness, pointed not only to the path of individual transformation, but also to the foundation on which genuine love grows. True love originates not in the external manifestations of personality demonstrated to the world, but in the innermost depths where unexpressed aspects lie hidden, denied by the person, and carefully concealed from prying eyes. It is in this inner world that the true essence of a person begins to unfold, manifesting in the nature of the love they attract. Perhaps each of us has experienced in our lives a feeling for another person, the intensity of which remains a mystery to this day. Perhaps a person gave themselves entirely without reservation, sacrificing even those parts of their personality that should not have been given away. Perhaps they succumbed to despair, showed all forgiveness, found excuses, and built castles in the air to the point of exhaustion. And now, looking back, they cannot comprehend how they reached such a degree of self-denial. However, Jung suggests looking at the situation from a different angle, asserting that every connection with another person is a reflection of the primary connection with oneself. This is not about self-flagellation, but about honest and impartial self-observation. What part of the personality believed that this was true love? Many people carry a deep wound that silently cries out, "Love me as I have never been loved." This emotional wound, like a skillful radar and a reliable compass, relentlessly draws a person to the painful yet achingly familiar. As a result, the individual is drawn into a vicious cycle, pursuing those who reject them, idolizing those who ignore them, and yearning for those who have no intention of staying. Deep within this unconscious repetition lies a childlike hope that this time things will be different. However, this hope remains futile until the realization dawns. Another person enters life not to fill an inner void, but to point out one's own incompleteness. This is the hidden beauty of love. Even when it seems to fail, it accomplishes something sacred, revealing a person, exposing their shadows, teaching them boundaries, and demonstrating their established behavioral patterns. No connection leaves no trace, but there is no trace that cannot be transformed into awareness if one is willing to look at it with due depth. The questions, why am I attracted to cold people? Why do I get entangled in impossible relationships? And why do I run away when someone loves me sincerely? Are not aimed at finding culprits. They are a call to awakening. Awakened, a person realizes that the love they deserve will not come to save them from inner emptiness. It will come to find them when they reconcile with themselves. Until a person runs from their loneliness, from their silence, and from their truth, they will continue to attract love that only confirms their negative beliefs about themselves, that they are not good enough, that they must make an effort, that they must wait, and that they must settle for less. But all this is just an illusion born of wounded self-esteem. True love dwells not in illusion, but in presence. As Jung said, what a person does not realize manifests in their life as fate. In the context of love, this fate takes the form of a cycle: attraction, euphoria, disappointment, emptiness, repeating endlessly until the person stops, until they stop looking for answers outside and turn their gaze inward. It all starts with healing. When a person goes through this journey, their inner energy transforms, which in turn affects their social circle. There is no longer attraction based on need. Instead, there is a magnetism emanating from emotional fullness. It is felt, it is seen, it is experienced on a completely different level. However, do not expect instant magic. Healing is a process that includes nights full of doubt, periods of agonizing loneliness, possible relapses, and nostalgia for the past, but all this is an integral part of the journey. It is impossible to know true love without looking into one's own abyss. You cannot support others without first learning to support yourself. You cannot say, "I choose you out of freedom," if you have not first made a choice in favor of yourself, with all your virtues and flaws, wounds and strengths. And when that day comes, there will be no need for perfect love. It is more important that it is real, that it has sincerity and reciprocity, that there is space for openness without masks and pretense. But for this to be possible, it is first necessary to get rid of the masks that a person used to earn love. Love is not a theatrical stage where roles are played, but a sacred temple where two people meet, ready to see each other as they are and allow themselves to be seen. The most eloquent aspect of love is not so much the actions or inactions of a partner, but the internal changes that it initiates, awakening dormant feelings, revealing hidden fears, and transforming personality. Love, therefore, serves as a gateway to the innermost corners of the human psyche. Going through this experience with an open heart and mind, a person realizes that every relationship carries a certain message, acting as a mentor and mirror. Some relationships expose the dark sides of personality, while others, on the contrary, highlight its virtues, but all of them, without exception, bring a person closer to a deeper understanding of themselves. Ultimately, the point is not the number of broken hearts, but the ability to recover and return to oneself after each painful experience. It is important not to close yourself off from the world, but to continue to love without losing your individuality. This becomes possible only when you realize that the love we attract into our lives is not accidental, but is a reflection of our inner world, an echo of our beliefs, wounds, emotional past, and level of awareness. The love we attract reveals our essence and potential for personal growth. Every relationship, even the most painful ones, has the potential to push us toward a more authentic, free, and conscious version of ourselves. Embarking on this path of self-discovery and transformation, a person undergoes irreversible internal changes. Love, this incomprehensible force that drives the human heart, defies logical explanation or rational measurement. It is like a river originating in the depths of the human soul, in its most ancient, primitive, and secret corners. Carl Jung, a perceptive explorer of the human psyche, argued that love not only connects two hearts, but also brings to light the most hidden corners of the soul. Indeed, a deep connection is impossible without transformation, and every sincere expression of love opens a door to the unknown, to something greater than ourselves. At times, people enter our lives possessing disarming tenderness, yet acting with surgical precision, touching our deepest complexes. This is not a coincidence, but a manifestation of synchronicity, a symbolic language of the unconscious, indicating the need for further self-improvement. Perhaps each of us has wondered, why do emotionally unavailable people constantly appear in our lives, or why does unconditional love scare us? The answer, however unfair it may seem, lies not in others but in ourselves. Jung introduced the concepts of anima, and animus, denoting internal representations of the female and male soul present in every person. These images, shaped by experience and culture, profoundly influence the choice of a partner. It's not just about tastes or compatibility, but about unconscious projection. We see in another person what we lack in ourselves. We idealize, dream, create an image, and then suffer when that image collapses. But this image was never real. It was merely a reflection of a part of ourselves yearning for recognition. It is from this recognition that the true path of self-discovery begins. Love ceases to be a battlefield or a vital necessity, transforming into a practice of self-exploration. We ask ourselves questions. Why do I seek validation of my worth from the outside? Why do I confuse the intensity of feelings with true love? Why am I afraid to show myself as I truly am? And in each answer lies a seed of liberation. The pain does not disappear, but it ceases to control us because we no longer need another person to fill our inner void. We accept this pain, embrace it, and stop being afraid. However, the path to awakening is not always easy. It often happens that a person must experience the bitterness of disappointment in a relationship to see the true state of affairs. Sometimes it is necessary to face the feeling of abandonment, betrayal, or indifference to realize that throughout their life they have neglected themselves. And although such experiences cause pain, they can become the turning point that radically changes life. After all, the love a person deserves does not require self-sacrifice, does not force them to hide or break themselves to meet someone else's expectations. True love begins when a person stops begging for what they should have been given from the beginning: respect, attention, and truth. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung argued that the scariest thing is not meeting another person, but confronting oneself. And this is precisely what genuine love pushes us towards. It places a person before a mirror, forcing them to see their contradictions, unhealed wounds, and fears that they mask with pride. But it also reveals a limitless capacity for recovery. After all, if a person was capable of loving while experiencing pain, one can only imagine how they can love while in a state of awareness. Looking back, a person begins to understand that everyone who has passed through their life has left something important, a lesson, a reflection, or a challenge. Someone taught them to set boundaries, someone to show tenderness, some awakened, others destroyed to allow for rebirth. And this is also a manifestation of love, although it may not seem so at first, because it prompted the person to know themselves, take care of themselves, and listen to themselves. It returned them to themselves, and when this happens, love changes its form. There is no longer a need to persuade someone to stay, no tolerance for crumbs of attention, no more attraction to drama. Something inside the person has matured. They have reached their emotional bottom, and now they can build something solid, perhaps not perfect, but real, based on presence, honesty, and the ability to say, this is me and this is not. And this drastically changes what a person attracts into their life. When a person chooses themselves, the world begins to reflect that choice. They no longer seek all-consuming intensity, but strive for a connection that elevates. They no longer idealize but observe. They no longer pursue but align. Thus love becomes a sacred space where there is no room for perfection, but there is truth. Here one can be themselves without fear, and allow another person to be the same, without masks, without games, with the maturity of someone who understands that loving is an act of courage, but also of freedom. And that's when everything falls into place, when a person realizes that the love they attract into their life has nothing to do with luck or blind fate. It is a reflection of their inner state, their wounds, and their choices. In the pursuit of personal growth, every love that arises on life's path, even the one that leaves behind the bitterness of parting, carries a valuable lesson, opening new horizons of understanding. This is where the true magic lies, not mythical, but spiritual awakening. When a person realizes this, they stop looking for someone to blame, get rid of repeating old mistakes, stop wasting themselves on relationships that don't provide support, and begin to move forward with a renewed consciousness, full of maturity and dignity. They understand that true love is not a desperate search, but a natural result of inner evolution. Every step is important in this process, even those taken in a state of ignorance. This stage of the journey has come to an end, but the search continues. Carl Jung's psychology teaches that life is defined not by the answers found, but by the courage to ask oneself important questions. In the realm of love, these questions can cause internal upheaval. What type of love do I attract into my life? What does this say about my personality? Is my choice based on true needs or on emotional traumas? The answers to these questions can be painful, but they also bring liberation. This video delves into the innermost depths of the human psyche, into those hidden corners where doubts, unrealized aspirations, and personal projections are concealed. Drawing on the teachings of Carl Jung, it emphasizes the importance of not avoiding one's own shadow, but rather integrating it into the personality. This involves accepting the fact that romantic relationships will not always be ideal and cloudless. Often, it is in these relationships that something is hidden, designed to open one's eyes to certain aspects of oneself. It is emphasized that every relationship, even those that cause pain, serves as a kind of mirror, reflecting the image of a person who may have been forgotten or ignored. This is where their transformative power lies. When a person looks into this mirror with sincerity and openness, significant changes occur in their inner world. The process of self-discovery begins, the need to meet the expectations of others disappears, and the willingness to dissolve into another person vanishes. As a result, one comes to understand that love is not reckless sacrifice, not a desire for salvation or constant suffering. True love is characterized by awareness, presence in the moment, and emotional responsibility. This state arises only when a person puts themselves first, making a conscious choice in favor of their own well-being and development. Carl Jung viewed individuation as a complex path of self-discovery, during which a person finds their true essence, freeing themselves from the socially imposed roles and masks formed by fear and the desire to survive. This is a process of unlocking the potential inherent in the depths of the personality. Love plays a key role here because self-knowledge is impossible without openness and a willingness to share what is most intimate. To understand one's shadow side, one must allow another person to reflect it. Changing one's personal history requires the courage to experience emotions, make mistakes, and start all over again. Many people were raised under the influence of ideas about love that constrict and limit. These ideas instill that love is self-sacrifice, suppressing one's own voice and patiently enduring suffering. However, a conscious view of love changes everything. Love appears not as dissolving into another, but as a way of finding oneself. It does not fill an inner void, but allows one to share one's own fullness. To love means not to control one's partner, but to give them the freedom to be themselves. When a person achieves inner harmony, their environment also changes. The external world begins to reflect the balance that they have created within themselves. But what happens when the desired harmony has not yet been achieved? When relationships that cause suffering, drain energy, and bring no benefit continue to be attracted into life? It is important to realize that this, too, is an integral part of the journey. This is not a failure, but a valuable lesson, an awakening to a new reality. After all, every experience carries a specific task. It pushes a person towards a deeper understanding of themselves, highlights those areas that still need healing, shows in what aspects there is still an expectation that someone else will fill the inner void that can only be filled independently. And while this process may seem endless and painful, it possesses a powerful transformative potential. Sometimes, to realize the kind of love one deserves, it is necessary to go through an experience where such love was completely absent. And this, by no means, makes them weak. It makes them human. After all, no one is born with the ability to love consciously. No one grows up without emotional wounds. No one is immune to mistakes when attachment is mistaken for love, need for generosity, and silence for peace. However, when a person decides to look at the situation honestly, when they stop blaming others and take responsibility for their own life, a turning point occurs. And this internal transformation becomes the key to liberation. The presented video is not a panacea for all of life's troubles. It does not contain universal answers, but one important conclusion can still be drawn from it. The feelings that a person experiences for others are first and foremost a reflection of their inner world, an opportunity for self-discovery, and not a punishment from heaven. The desire to be loved, understood, and appreciated begins with acceptance and love for oneself. Only from a state of inner harmony and completeness can one attract healthy, conscious, and sincere relationships into their life. This process of self-improvement is endless. There will always be new facets that need to be discovered, emotions that need to be integrated, and versions of oneself waiting to be accepted. Every step towards oneself is a step towards true love, devoid of idealization and cinematic flair, where one can be oneself without fear of judgment, without masks and the need to prove anything. This is love that supports, not demands, builds, not destroys. If doubts arise about one's own strength, it is important to remember that this path has already begun. Self-analysis, searching for answers in the depths of the soul. This is already a step forward, and one is not alone in this. Millions of people are going through similar experiences, making mistakes, waking up and starting over. And love is also manifested in this, in recognizing oneself in another, even when their actions are incomprehensible or cause pain.